like to call the meeting to order. Would you like to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First on the agenda, can I have approval of the agenda, please? Motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda for tonight. Second.
All those in favor of the agenda? Aye. Okay, hearing no opposed, we'll move on to approval of the opening minute meetings of February 24th, 2020.
Motion to approve the open minute meetings of February 24th, 2020. Second.
Just want to mention that before we pass this, the opening minute meetings of February 24th, 2020 are very informative. There's a lot of detail in there about the 5-year projections of budget and a few other pieces of information that are useful to read. It's up on our website. All those in favor of the minutes, please say aye. Aye. All right, hearing none opposed, we'll move on to the superintendent's comments. Joe?
All right, thank you. Just one item, and it's an item of obviously a great deal of import, and it's the latest guidance and updates that we've had regarding the COVID-19 or coronavirus epidemic. There has been a nonstop stream of guidance and updates from both the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, as well as the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. A lot of the guidance, obviously, the initial pieces have been a lot around common sense, specifically, hand washing and sanitizing techniques and so on. However, as with each successive day, there's been more and more pragmatic considerations that are popping up. And specifically, we're finding more and more situations of folks, specifically adults and parents across the Commonwealth, starting to self-quarantine due to concerns about even casual contact at a meeting or in a public place with somebody who either has been diagnosed or is suspicious of having the COVID-19 virus. At this juncture, the guidance that we're receiving with regard to students coming to school, not coming to school, with regard to a parent self-quarantining, the Department of Public Health is saying that those students should be coming to school, particularly if parents are asymptomatic. However, as I know, it is very fluid, and I just want to put on your radar screen that we will be meeting with both the Upton and Mendon departments of the boards of health within the next couple of days. And it's our game plan to update our district and our individual school emergency plans to cover the possibilities as best as we possibly can. And I see as one of the potential most extreme cases would be the case of shutting down an individual school or shutting down our district for a period of quarantine. The good news, as I note in the background notes, we are an approved district for having the alternative structured learning plan, specifically at the secondary level doing online learning, and at the elementary level sending home assignments. So if worse came to worse, and again, this is just strictly a hypothetical at this point, that is something that we would have at our disposal. But again, it's still a fluid situation. Second, as far as an update, ironically enough, you probably recall a year ago, as a school committee, you approved 2 international trips, one to Italy and one to China. No, I'm not making that up. We don't have a third one to Iran. But needless to say, both of those have been canceled. At present time, the company that is dealing with Mr. Messick is refunding the money for the students and their families, and also by vote, it looks like the group of students, in conjunction with parents and in conjunction with Ms. Reardon, who is organizing the trip, is looking to defer that trip to April of 2021. We still have some other outstanding trips. Specifically, we've got the DECA competition, the DECA National competition. We also have our trip to Virginia Beach for our band competition, and then also a NASA exploration trip to Orlando. The trip to Orlando has been canceled due to the simple fact that the state of New Jersey, where a lot of the competing schools are coming from, has put a ban on all travel, including domestic travel. At this juncture, per the governor's recommendations, there is no ban on domestic travel per se, but again, it's very much a fluid situation. And I'm sure at each successive school committee meeting, I will provide additional information and provide additional information to our families should it become available. Okay?
All right, so let's move on to the presentation of the fiscal year 2019 emergency budget.
Okay, thank you. So first and foremost, as I do every year, realize that the development of our annual operational budget is not an act that's done just by one or two people. It's a collective effort. So I'd like to acknowledge the Regional School Committee and specifically our Budget Subcommittee, which is right on the first page of the summary document, for being so thoughtful and deliberate in their approach in putting together the best possible budget that meets our students' needs effectively. I'd also like to thank the MURSD leadership team, all of our principals, all of our department heads, who again, going back to the month of November, start taking in all of the requests and again, are very, very thoughtful and deliberate in what they do each and every single year. So I'd like to start my comments with a little bit of a story. And you know when you have just these aha moments, these epiphanies. And specifically, about a month ago, I got an invite from the class of 1995 of Pontiac High School, where just over the border in Rhode Island, where I was a classroom teacher and also the principal. And I got the invite to their 25th reunion. And it just felt weird for a second, like, wait a minute, 1995 was 25 years ago? No, that can't be right. But it was. It was 25 years ago. And I started to think about how much has education changed in the last 25 years? What did it look like back in the day when I was a chemistry teacher in 1995? What did it look like here in Mendon and Upton? What did it look like at our 4 schools? And I actually, as I was thinking about it, I actually pulled a couple yearbooks for the MISCO 1995 yearbook and the NIPUC 1995 yearbook. And it was fun, and it was great taking a look at what was happening, and quite frankly, there isn't a lot of staff that are still here in the MURSD. But I took a look at what was actually happening in the classrooms. And again, I am sure that in Mendon Upton in 1995, our kids were receiving a terrific education. But I took a look at kind of what was happening in those pictures, and I saw desks in kind of neat little rows. I saw kids with books, and it was probably a very traditional paradigm of instruction that the kids were receiving back then. Probably like many of you that went to school, like me, 70s, 80s, 90s. I know there's some young ones in the 2000s in the crowd. But very, very traditional practice. And I thought about that, and then I contrasted it with our classrooms of today. I am super fortunate that as superintendent of schools, 2 or 3 times a week, I get the opportunity, along with the principals, for about an hour to 90 minutes to walk through classes in all 4 buildings. And what you see there is a snapshot of the things that I see. And you'll know it's dramatically different than just 25 years ago, okay? You see students having to think analytically, having to debate, having to reason. You see students very willfully and smartly and purposefully using technology to really get to higher order thinking. Okay, it's a dramatically different world just in that short 25-year span. And as a district, we really strive to bring out all of those skills that I mentioned, sometimes referred to as the 3 C's: communication, collaboration, creativity, again, analytical thought, and the ability to collaborate with peers, the ability to really understand others' perspectives. And it's kind of interesting. Why do we do this? Why do we do this? Why is this part of our core mission of what we do each and every single day? There's a real simple answer to that. These are the skills that our kids need for today and beyond. Kind of interesting. Once a year you hear about an organization. It's a NGO known as the World Economic Forum, because they have their conference in Davos, Switzerland, and you usually hear some scuttlebutt. But every year it's a convening of political, business, and cultural leaders. And they reflect upon things like this. Just last year, what are the most in-demand careers of the 2020s, of this generation moving forward? And you see things there like artificial intelligence and machine learning specialists, data analysts, big data specialists, technology specialists, digital transformation specialists. These were things that we never, ever would have thought of back in 1995, because we were just on the precipice of technology being a big mover and shaker. So again, it speaks to the things that we absolutely need to do with our students. It isn't so much a want, it's a need moving forward. And with all of that, yes, it's a different time, but our core mission as a school district, our core mission as 158 teachers and 311 professional staff members is to do everything to empower all of the learners entrusted in our care to thrive. And by thriving, not only thriving academically, but also thriving socially, emotionally. So, so important. It's what drives us in our work every day. And the budget that I'm about to present to you speaks to all of that, giving the kids the skills, the knowledge, and habits of mind that they need, while also staying true to our core mission as a regional school district. So as I do every year, and it's really the starting point of every budget, you have to take a look at our enrollment. Where are we this year? What are our official October 1st numbers? What are we projecting next year? And then beyond that. So if you take a look at the enrollment statistics, our official October 1st enrollment is 2,286 students across our 4 schools. And then we're projecting it to be relatively stable. Relatively stable. And the core loss, which will be a little under 20 students, probably will be seen at MISCO for the simple reason of the outgoing Eighth grade class is larger than the incoming fifth grade class. So that essentially is it. If you take a look at our average class sizes across the board, you can see at the elementary level, they really are in a very, very good place, generally in the low 20s. We intentionally try to keep the early childhood grades of K, 1 and 2 smaller versus 3 and 4. And again, you see Misto a little under 24 and Nipmuc a little bit around 23. If you've noticed, you've seen a bit of an upward creep at Nipmuc for the simple reason that Nipmuc's population over the last 3 years has increased because more students are matriculating here to Nipmuc than choosing other options such as BVT. You may wonder, how do we actually project what our enrollment is going to be? We receive enrollment projections from an organization known as NESDEC, which is the New England Staff Development Council. And every year, right around the holidays, they send us a projection, and they actually go 10 years out. And what they do is they look at the live birth data for each of our communities, and then they also look at mobility, and they also look at housing permits, and so on. Kind of interestingly enough, this is the first year in the last 9 years where they're actually showing that over the next 10 years, we will have an increase in enrollment. As I'm sure many of you on the school committee, particularly Lee and Phil, who've been here 9 years, or going on 9 years, you've probably seen a lot of projections where it's flat or a slight decrease. And as you can see, it's predicting over the next 10 years an increase of approximately 300 students, and within the next 5, an increase of about 100 or so. Kind of interestingly enough, that should be noted, almost all of that increase they're projecting through the town of Upton. Okay, as you can see, those same numbers, approximately 170 to 175, 270 of those students will be coming from the town of Upton. And if you look at the same numbers for Mendon, it's relatively flat with an increase of only about 30. Something that they do every year, which is very, very important, is to wonder, who do we have coming into our kindergarten for the following September? As you can see, that darker blue line represents the birth data in our communities, and then the lighter greenish color represents how many students actually enroll in kindergarten 5 years after they're born. Okay, so as you can see, there was a slight decrease, ever so slight, between 2014 and 2015. So there could be a commensurate slight decrease in kindergarten enrollment. However, if you look at the number of what happened between 13 and 14 in the birth rate, but then the actual kindergarten enrollment at Clough and Memorial, 5 years after the fact, it actually had a slight increase. I think of concern is to take a look at the jump between 2015 and 2016. You're talking about a magnitude of approximately 30 to 35 additional babies born in that span, which will no doubt be reflected in enrollment in September of 2021. So something to be cognizant of. I think a second thing to be cognizant of, quite frankly, I have some concerns, is this. And if you live in Upton or you frequent Route 140, you probably have seen this development known as 149 Main Street. 149 Main Street is an apartment complex with 44 units, the majority being 2 and 3 bedroom units, 11 of which are affordable housing. They are set to start renting, I believe, during the month of June. So my concern is, and again, this didn't necessarily enter the NESDEC enrollment projections that we received in December, but this could definitely impact, particularly Memorial Elementary School, this coming September. So that gives you a sense of our enrollment. As I do every year, I'd like to talk about what are our budget drivers and what are we projecting for revenue moving forward. So the proposed FY 2021 budget, or the budget for the 2021 school year, is a $38,961,161 proposal. That is a 6.99% increase, a little bit more than $2.5 million from our current fiscal year budget. Always, we look to maintain level services, and the term level services means continuing with the same programs and services for our students as we currently have. However, as I'll talk about in a few slides, we also are looking to add some real critical needs, a relatively speaking modest amount of targeted investments. And again, consistent with our strategic plan, this proposal maintains the optimal class sizes that I just showed you, but also builds upon our strategic plan's priorities of social emotional learning and also inclusionary practices to support all learners at all levels. So in taking a look at what are our major drivers for this coming fiscal year, the two largest for really any public organization are always going to be salaries and benefits. So first and foremost, our salary increases. We are presently, salary increases for all employees across the district. We've budgeted a little under $640,000 or $636,692. Keep in mind that includes the mandated steps and lanes increases. And I should note, with all 5 of our organizations, the Regional School Committee is presently in negotiations. Employee benefits, at this juncture, we've budgeted about 11.5% increase for the simple reason that we've had a very challenging year with some of the claims that have been brought forward. Additionally, because of the age of our staff, we always have to budget a certain amount for changes in plans. For example, a relatively young teacher who then gets married and then starts a family, transitioning from an individual plan to a family plan, and so on and so forth. Like most municipalities in the Worcester County retirement, for our employees that are not part of the Massachusetts Teachers Retirement Association, those employees pay into the Worcester County retirement. Again, third straight year of an increase in our assessment in the ballpark of about 10%, so about $77,000. Obviously, we always have as a driver transportation. We will be starting the first of a 3-year contract with Telstone & Son, who has been our regular transportation provider. That first year increase is about 6.5%, which translates to $111,440. Also, special education transportation, that is also a real challenge. That is the transportation that is allocated for our students that have out-of-district placements. Oftentimes, these placements, we try to keep them as close to the home district as possible, and we also try to share transportation with neighboring districts. However, sometimes you may have a placement that is in the city, or is in Framingham, or is heading down to the South Shore, And also, unfortunately, there's a limited number of carriers that do that business. So we've budgeted 5.3%, which is also a significant driver. Then in student services, we have a significant increase of a little under 100,000 or 92,615. We have gone in the span of 1 year from a total of 6 students from Mendon and Upton accessing a charter school to 12. So literally doubled in 1 year span. As a regional school district, we have to subsume those costs. So that is also included in the student services lines. And we also have a slight decrease in out-of-district tuitions for the simple reason of the anticipation of a student aging out. Other budget drivers include some real needs with regard to buildings and grounds. One of the big concerns, and I know Jay Beyer, our Director of Finance and Operations, usually gives a report out every single meeting of some of the ongoing maintenance concerns. One of the largest ones being one of the burners here at Nipmuc Regional High School. Keep in mind, Nipmuc is now 23 years old. The overwhelming majority of the equipment is the original 1997 equipment. And we've got one fairly large concern with some of the specific parts on a burner, and we're looking to get an overhaul of that. As far as textbooks and instructional supplies, back in 2013, the school committee approved a elementary literacy series known as Reading Wonders. We're looking to upgrade particularly a lot of the digital materials that go along with the program. So there's an investment there of $28,530. And then as part of our one-to-one learning initiative at the middle school and the high school, the overwhelming majority of texts are digital, so they're on students' iPads. We're looking to renew the lease for all of the high school math texts. So there's an investment there. Then last but not least, there is included a $60,000 investment for student technology devices, but also applications. And a lot of that largely is at the elementary level, at Clough and Memorial elementary schools. We're finding more and more, particularly related to math, there's a lot of various applications that really make the abstract concepts a lot more concrete for students. And we're finding there's more and more of a need for investment in individual devices to be used at the classroom level. Hence, there is an investment there. I also talked about some critical needs that are included in the proposal, and specifically it is a request for 4 additional positions, 2 of which being school psychologists. In my 9 years as superintendent of schools, we've never had this position in place, and we are well beyond time of having this critical position in our schools to work with our students. A consistent theme, and quite frankly, schools are a microcosm of society. There is a lot more anxiety, there's a lot more social emotional needs, there's a lot of more mental health issues in our schools. These 2 positions will be critical in working with youth and their families that really have some significant needs. So budgeted is $160,000 for those 2 FTEs. However, for the last several years, we've been working with school psychologists strictly as a contracted service, strictly as a purchase service. So we've actually reduced that line by $95,000. So the net investment for these two positions would be $65,000 in salary. Secondly, again, with some of our needs with regard to special education and the complexity of issues that we're dealing with and the complexity of working with families and working with a team of educators, also included is an additional elementary special education team chair. We have, at present time, 3 team chairs. The mindset would be also to have now 1 for every building, and the greatest need by far is at the elementary level. Our 2 elementary principals, Deb Swain and Jan Gallagher, do an exemplary job in managing all of these pieces, but keep in mind, when you're talking about a building of, in the case of Memorial, 470 students, roughly, and in the case of Clough, roughly 370 students, it is very, very difficult to manage caseloads, but also to manage the things that come up in the course of a day. And then the 4th position is to replace what was cut, one of the positions that was cut last year. If the school committee will recall, as part of the process last year to make our budget balanced last year, a total of 4 positions had to be cut. 2 of them were library media specialist positions, one of which being here at Nipmuc Regional High School. It's a real concern seeing that the standards for accreditation through NEASC, or the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, calls for that position to be in place as part of one of the indicators for the standards for accreditation. So as we've reported out at previous school committee meetings, NEASC will be doing a commission-directed visit later this spring to see the status on replacing that position. So I say that these 4 positions are included in the proposal, and that yes, indeed, they're all critical needs. But I also want to share with you what the leadership team put also in the initial proposal. Okay, and you can see some of the positions here. I know I see some of our staff here, and I know the staff would also agree. Things like math coaches, literacy coaches, to work with teachers in really integrating math and literacy across all content areas in an effective manner. Additional support with regard to special education, particularly in building what we're doing with regard to inclusion. I know there's some parents here that have children in the Spanish immersion program, and we've also had this ongoing conversation about equity and what we're doing to bring world language and the culture that goes to non-SI students. So there was the idea of getting a FLES program, or foreign language in the elementary school program, up and running. Keep in mind, none of these positions, which again, I believe that they're critical needs, and I also believe that many of our comparable districts have these positions in place, they're not included. We're fully cognizant, and I feel comfortable speaking for the regional school committee, we're fully cognizant of the demands and the stressors on our 2 communities and what it means as far as funding. As far as looking at the opposite side of the house, the anticipated revenue, if I had to boil it down to one simple point, the trend continues where there is additional onus, additional responsibility for the funding of our regional school district on our 2 communities. Okay, so once again, in Chapter 70, which is the main state funding formula, the state funding stream, we're receiving $30 additional per student. So that translates to an increase of $65,310, which is a whopping 0.52% increase. We've also received an increase of a little under $20,000 for regional transportation. Keep in mind, to transport our kids, it costs about $1.3 million every year. Keep in mind, as a regional school district, we're supposed to receive 100% reimbursement. We typically are in the ballpark of about 65 to 70%. Keep in mind, a lot of municipalities charge homes for busing. Trust me, we don't want to do that. There are no plans, but also legally, we could not charge you, being a regional school district. So we did receive an increase in charter school reimbursement, which is $31,193. But as I noted, with that additional 6 students accessing charter schools, we also got an increase in tuition of about $93,000. So our net increase in state aid is $23,603, which is all of 0.17%. I'm going to have a lot more to say about that in a few minutes. As far as local assessments, something that I'm going to talk about a little bit more is the MLC, or the minimum local contribution. The minimum local contribution is what the state says, at a minimum, you should be increasing to the school district in a year. So the minimum local contribution increase is fairly significant, 6.80% to Mendon, and to Upton 5.42%. So you can see for Mendon, it's $491,828, and to Upton, that MLC is $469,452. However, because of a perfect storm of many different events, and really the bottom line, what we need for level services, what we need for those 4 critical need positions, the additional, not including debt service, to Mendon is $803,205. The additional $1,002,245, for an increase of $1,295,033 to Mendon, and $1,471,697 to Upton. Now keep in mind, as a regional school district, oftentimes we use local receipts, things internally to fund a portion of the district. We have something called E&D, or excess and deficiency. That is essentially for the regional school district free cash, kind of the rainy day fund. Right now, at this time, we've got about $400,000 in excess and deficiency. We cannot access that as a funding stream. If it were in the ballpark, as it was previous years, $800, $900, $1 million, yes. Last year, we accessed $300,000. However, we cannot access that. It would be irresponsible. We also have various revolving funds, such as our before and after school care program that we access, as well as Medicaid reimbursement that we receive for about $250,000. So that's it as far as our district receipts that we're able to use. I do want to point out, and perhaps through the fall, you heard something known as the Student Opportunity Act. And this is seen as a landmark piece of legislation that over the next 7 fiscal years is going to infuse $1.5 billion of additional Chapter 70 state funding to school districts across the Commonwealth. And as a matter of fact, what we use in building our budget is we use the House 1 budget, which is Governor Baker's budget. And in Governor Baker's proposal,
he actually increased Chapter 70 by $305 million. Significant increase. However, I do want everyone to realize that the thrust of the Student Opportunity Act is to receive, to promote additional funding for high poverty districts and districts that have a lot of English language learners. This time, Mendon and Upton are neither. As a matter of fact, 80% of all the funding is going to a very, very small number of communities. Communities that are known as gateway communities. Okay, so 80% of all those funds are only going to 35 districts. I can tell you, you saw the percentage increase, 65,000 for Mendon and Upton. The district of Milford, just down the road, is getting an additional 4.9 million. Worcester is getting an additional 18 million. Okay, so yes, the Student Opportunity Act is great in the sense that it's trying to close some of those equity gaps. However, realize it's a very, very small number of districts, and it's nothing that's going to positively impact the Mendon-Upton Regional School District during its time of implementation. These next two slides are essentially, if you look in the budget summary handbook, just pages 7 and 8 that show the bottom line of the proposal as far as what the increases are. And in putting this together, we are very, very cognizant that this is a significant ask of our two communities. And again, we're in a very, very similar situation as we've been in years past, where we are certainly cognizant that these asks for increases in operational assessments are not within the Proposition 2.5 levy limit. I do want to point out, as I have during the past few years, again, in further elaborating on the issue of increased onus, increased responsibility for our communities, is this concept known as target share. And without kind of getting into a lot of weeds and getting into a lot of the really hairy specifics of this, I'd like to talk a little bit about why Mendon and Upton are in this position, and realize there's many communities across the Commonwealth that are in this position. The target share essentially speaks to by what percentage should a community be investing in public education, K through 12, for all of its students in the district, okay? And in the case of Mendon and Upton, you're really talking largely the Mendon-Upton Regional School District. Did my mic down? Yeah. Am I using my teacher voice well enough? Yeah. All right. Just let me know if anybody can't hear me.
Grab a mic.
Okay, I can. Is that on? Better? All right, super. So in the case of the Mendon-Upton Regional School District, the overwhelming majority of that funding for Mendon and for Upton goes to students here, but also a percentage goes to students at BVT, and then there's a very, very small amount, a percentage, that goes to students who access Norfolk Aggie. But a target share is essentially what percentage of the overall budget should a community be paying, okay? And they determine that percentage every single year. They recalibrate it based upon two things. Your aggregate property values, what are all the property in a given community worth, and what is the aggregate personal income level. And these two things together are known as MGRF, which stands for Municipal Growth Revenue Factor. So it's something that changes from year to year. So to give you perspective, these are all of our neighboring communities in our two towns. And you can see for this coming fiscal year what the percentages are. And you can kind of say, well, does that really make sense based on how you know those communities and their collective wealth? Okay, but keep in mind the overall funding formula, if you were to take all 351 communities across the Commonwealth, it's basically fixed so that municipalities cover overall 59% and state aid should cover 41%. That's the split, okay? But as you can see, just about all of our communities, most of our communities, with the exception of, let's see now, Northbridge and Milford, are well above that 59%. Okay, and again, it varies from community to community. The lowest, and has been consistently lowest, is Lawrence, which is only responsible for 13.7% of their school budget. And then there's 157 communities that are at the cap, and the cap is 82.5%. Okay, so two of our neighbors, or at least neighbors to Upton, Westboro, and Hopkinton, are at that cap, and actually they've been at that cap for at least the last 3 or 4 years. So how do Mendon and Upton fare? So for FY21, Mendon's target share is 78.45%, and Upton's is at 75.95%. So you can see we're two communities that are rapidly approaching that cap, okay? And we're also two of 101 communities that are below their target share, okay, based upon what has been contributed the previous fiscal year. So keep in mind, I've been giving this presentation for 9 years, and the good news is our communities have been making very, very good effort. But part of the problem is it's almost like it's a moving target. It's a moving goalpost based upon the relative wealth of each community. Okay? Target share, that percentage, determines the thing that I talked about a few slides ago, the MLC, or the minimum local contribution. So this is my best attempt at creating a GIF, but I want to give you perspective on where we've been over the last 9 years. The green represents the town share of the budget, according to the state funding formula, and the blue represents state aid, or the state share. Okay, so as you can see, if you follow it, going back to FY12, or the 11-12 school year, to the current, you see each successive year, according to the state funding formula, that the state is saying, Mendon and Upton, you need to contribute more to the budget. And hence, we are in this period for the foreseeable future that the onus, the responsibility for funding increases is going to fall on our two communities. It's very, very challenging, to say the least. So, I think with all this said, what is the bottom line? And we can talk about target share, we can talk about state funding, but really, in real terms, let's talk about what this means to the education of our children. Okay, the bottom line. So, what I've decided to do is I've put together 3 scenarios. And again, scenario 1 would be the full funding of the proposed request of keeping things level services, and also with those 4 additional critical needed positions. And you see what the increase is to our 2 communities. Second is just level services. So essentially would be those additional positions omitted from the request, just keeping exactly what you have. And I built this table just to show the point that the difference between level services and those additional critical needs is not very dramatic at all. Okay, so the additional request from our two communities is overwhelmingly to maintain what we have in place. Then the third scenario would be funding not based upon needs. Okay, and in years past, we've had, it's kind of an interesting dynamic when you have a regional school district of two communities and you work with the town's officials to see, okay, what does the revenue look like? And what can the towns afford, and so on. So myself and Jay Beyer, we start having these conversations around the holidays and the first of the year. And one of the initial numbers that we got from the town of Mendon was, in looking at the 2.5 levy limit and new growth, what we could put in place was an additional $237,490. Okay, and then working it through and looking at minimum local contribution and operational additional and matching it proportionally, that would be an additional assessment of $145,775 to the town of Upton. And essentially that would, and I talked about the lesser amount of local receipts, that would result in a total budgetary increase to Mendon and Upton of $162,764. And you see potentially, again, strictly based upon revenue, a shortfall of about $2.1 million for next fiscal year. So what does that actually equate to? If that reality were to come to fruition, easily layoffs of about 35 to 40 professional staff members, class sizes easily with that magnitude of layoffs in the ballpark of about 30. It might be high 20s, it might be low 30s, but that's what it would equate to. With that would also be reductions of programs, particularly at the secondary level, with regard to some of the electives, maybe some of the core academic area electives, such as world languages, music, and some of the arts. We've made a significant investment in special education, and particularly around the inclusion model. I think there would be some real deleterious effects with cuts where we'd have to start looking at more traditional models that would be more of a pull-out model that could be more efficient with lesser staff. And then I think we would also go back to the future with regard to athletic user fees. If you recall, back in 2011, 2012, families were paying upwards of $450, $500 for their child to play a sport. Okay, and as a result, our enrollment in sports across the board here at Nipmuc was dramatically down. I think we would have to return back to the future with that. Obviously, there would be cuts in our supply lines. Realize our supply lines represent probably no more than about 10% of the total budget, but there would be cuts in supplies and technology. And again, as I alluded to, I've got concerns about Nipmuc's accreditation status with regard to the New England associations and schools and colleges. So I say these things just out of reality. And I say these things because I think this district is at a significant inflection point. Once again, where one of two paths can be taken. So I think we don't really have to look very further than two neighboring communities, Uxbridge and Northbridge. Okay, within the last 3 years, both of those communities have had overrides that have failed. And I quote this statistic all the time. We're fortunate enough to have 169 students choice into the Mendon Upton Regional School District. Of those 169, 125 are from Uxbridge and Northbridge. Do you wonder why? There is a real significant difference in the quality of programming and services here versus those two communities. I know we have a lot of newer parents, newer staff members, but the years 2009 to 2011 were very, very difficult for this school district. Granted, it was in the middle of the Great Recession, and things were hard everywhere, but keep in mind, in that short 2-year span, the regional school district lost 20% of its staff. 1 out of 5 teachers, 1 out of 5 paraprofessionals, 1 out of 5 ABA techs lost their positions. Okay? Why did that happen? That happened because of really, really challenging times and times where overrides were not supported by both of our communities. But then there's the other path. And the other path is something that I know very well. It goes back to 2015. Okay, and in 2015, we had a campaign known as Forward 15 that really built upon the strength of our strategic plan. Really built upon the vision of what we wanted for all learners in our community. Okay? As you can see, it was a challenge. Everything didn't always go super easy, but both communities supported the regional school district. And as a result, what type of headlines have we seen over the last 5 years? We've seen a school district that has a focus on social emotional learning. We've seen a school district that has not only a state, a regional, but a national reputation for technology integration. We see, again, a continued success of a world award-winning Spanish immersion program. We've seen us pushing the limits of student learning through things like Inspired Learning Days, first starting here at Nipmuc and then expanding across the district. And then, yes, we've also had traditional accolades, such as being twice in the last 7 years an AP or advanced placement honor district, and also Nipmuc Regional High School being named as one of the best high schools in the nation by both Newsweek magazine and U.S. News and World Report. So again, these are very nice, but what really drives us is our strategic plan, which now, a year and a half after the fact, after approximately 40 parents, community members, staff members, and students came together and brought forward a vision of what do we want over the next 5 years? What do we want for all students? And also the Mendon-Upton Regional School District Portrait of a Learner. 6 real essential core competencies that we want for all of our students so that they can be successful for the careers that I just talked about. So I'd like to end on this closing note that every single year is a critical year. Okay, every single year is a critical year for our budget, but more importantly, every year is a critical year for our kids. Okay? You don't get a redo of the 3rd grade. You don't get a do-over for 7th grade. And the scenarios that I showed for you, particularly with regard to class size and fewer programs, is a real distinct possibility if the level of support is not there. So once again, we find ourselves in a situation that we were in 2015. And if you recall in the audience, and I know the regional school committee, again, not picking on you, but Lee and Phil, because you were there, you were too, Dorothy. In 2015, the regional school committee said, look, we're going to do everything that we can to manage this budget, and should an override be successful, We won't need one for 5 years. That was 2015. It's now 2020. We need our community support. Our children need our community support. And as I've been saying over the last several years, because of everything that I shared with regard to the state funding formula, the solution to our issues is strictly a local solution, plain and simple. So with that said, I'd be more than happy to take questions first from the Regional School Committee.
So first, before we open up for questions from the public, we have to manage questions from the school committee. I have one to start it off. Joe, I was wondering if you could review all of the thought processes that went into coming up with a critical need for the school psychologists, both in the surveys that you did and all the investigation you did to request that. Sure.
So plain and simple, over the last, I want to say, 2 budget cycles, FY19 and FY20, they have what you've seen as far as, with the exception of the library media specialists, have been placed in the budget requests, and they have consistently been the drivers, but keep in mind, for the FY19 and FY20 budget cycles, it was a challenge to even get to level services. In fact, for this current FY20, we did not have level services. We had to sustain cuts. So that really has been part of the thinking. I have a great deal of trust in our leadership team in cultivating the requests and the rationale behind what they've been requesting. But keep in mind, it's consistent. If you were to speak to our professional staff, if you were to speak to our service providers and so on, those positions, and again, particularly those 2.0 FTE school psychologists, consistently come up. Because again, the amount of needs that we have in our student population.
And there's also the surveys that we did for the student health surveys, correct? For the
Yes, a great point. So I think you're alluding to, well, every 2 years we administer something called the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey. All the Metro West districts submit it to our students in grades 6 through 12, and that's been a consistent issue as far as some of the increased mental health issues that have popped up.
Any other questions?
So I have a question. I guess, Joe, my question would be from your perspective and Jay's perspective, looking at target share and minimum local contribution, how many years away are we from being pushed to the 82.5%? That's the maximum MLC, minimum contribution.
If we were to continue the trend that we're at, probably in the ballpark of 4 to 5, potentially sooner. Again, it's all based upon the relative affluence of the community. Now, something could happen where, again, there could be a recession and things dramatically change, but you saw on the slide what the progression has been.
But just to follow up on that question, they're using numbers from 2018 for this, correct?
Correct, it's a year behind.
So there's still 2 years of run on the positive economy.
Correct.
Which shows that we'll probably get there sooner than later.
Correct.
Any other further questions? All right, we'd love to open this up for questions from the community. Can we turn those on to you?
Yeah, just gotta press, there's a mute button.
It's the one of them. We'll instruct you as you get okay. But please feel free to ask questions, comments to the microphone.
So in your scenario 3 doom and gloom scenario, when you went back to the towns, did those budgets include a increase in funds below the 2.5, or is that just without any increase whatsoever? If it did include an increase, that would be acceptable without an override. Then I guess part B doesn't really matter. But if it didn't, is there a scenario 2.5 where we're able to increase funding from both of the towns in order to get to some middle ground that's between doom and gloom and your ideas?
You saw what the increases would be strictly for level services, and anything below the level services would involve cutting staff.
So there is
And
no...
when you cut staff, you are cutting programs and services to kids.
So there is no in-between point of spend that doesn't include the removal of staff. There's no... I don't know what else to go after. I don't know enough about the details, but I'm just trying to identify, is there an opportunity for a middle ground that doesn't include cutting staff, but maybe makes, a services of, 1% cut across each school in the district, but not cut staff?
No, because you're overwhelming, again, at least 80% of your expenses are caught up in salaries and benefits. So yes, you could zero out supply lines, you could zero out technology and so on. However, in doing that, you're only getting to maybe about 10% of your total budget. So yes, I could, and myself and Jay Beyer, we could develop a budget that was at that middle ground that you're describing. However, realize even at that middle ground, you're looking at something below level services. So as a result, I could come up with a number and say, hey, look, great news. Only means a reduction of 10 or 15 staff members rather than 35. You're still going to impact things that are important, like class sizes and the programs and services that kids receive.
Well, all I was going to say and add to it was the perspective of, we looked at basically 3 scenarios. We looked at the issue in the item of what do we need to do to basically be equal for equal year to year? What do we need to do to be able to move forward on the strategic plan quite simply? And what do we do if we get what we've normally gotten in the past from the towns in those pieces? To what Joe said, we can actually go through and you could say, we could generate a number and say we're going to hit this target. The problem is when you get into that middle ground, all you're doing is you're going to continuously find ourselves in a loop of constantly coming back and having this conversation. And every year it will get significantly worse and worse and worse. So that's basically where we're at.
I also want to highlight that part of what the school committee has been about, at least from my point of view, and a couple of other ones I know about, we've always been trying to moderate the type of programs and expenditures that we could go after. You saw the list of requests from all the administrators for the different schools. A lot of those things are extremely important things. I can't tell you, there's things like science education that could be really done properly in the school district, and we've had to moderate our requests to be physically responsible for the towns. I just want to add that. Thanks.
Hello.
Hi, Shelley.
Hi, Shelley Cook, teacher, community person, and also parent, taxpayer in town of Upton. I have a few questions. So first, last month the numbers for reduction were 25 to 30. It's jumped 10. Just wondering what's happened in the past month.
We've made some alterations with regard to, that's not the only number that's changed. Some of the numbers changed with regard to healthcare insurance and some of the other expenditures and so on. So, yeah, I think the 35 is a very realistic number.
So that's the latest and greatest, is 25, 35 to 40.
Correct.
Press the button. No. The mute.
Let me just help you out here.
Jay, the mute.
The mic is not on. The mic is on.
Thank you, Jay.
Intelligence
Better.
not added.
No, not on my teacher voice yet. Next one, I noticed that there was para and other professional staff. Has there been any consideration for any admin and central office staff reductions?
It would be reductions across the board.
Okay, so that's also including,
I believe what was in my slide, it said 35 professional staff members.
okay, so that includes all. And then the rest, I have a few questions for numbers.
Great. Ask away.
All right. It appears that team chairs, department chairs will be reduced by at least one or approximately one at the elementary schools as well as at Nipmuc. Is that correct?
Those are instructional coordinators, those are stipend positions, department chairs, they're not team chairs at all. So what you're seeing up here,
We'll be
You
losing,
mind speaking to the microphone, please?
we'll be losing one.
Not you,
department chair.
Bartek. The response.
I'll look that up while you're talking.
So the question I had was under department heads, non-supervisory, with that, and then on the next page. Paraprofessionals, I have a question at Nipmuc. I'm not sure where paraprofessionals are, because for the 2020 adopted, it's 22,000, and it's reducing down to 1,000 for the proposed. So it almost sounds like an elimination of all paraprofessionals at the high school level?
There's no elimination.
So that position there is what's currently filling in the media center, so that position would be filled by a media specialist instead of a paraprofessional. Okay? I'll look up the other things.
All right, and then on the next page, materials library Nipmuc. When we did have a media specialist, it was around 9,000. With the para in there, it's 1,200. Are we projecting to get a media specialist at the high school?
It's in the proposal.
Okay, so we're still going to have the para instructional materials, but there will be a media specialist there. There was a significant cut in instructional materials when we went from a media specialist to a paraprofessional. And I'm just questioning why no increase if we expect to now have a media specialist back in that spot.
It was a decision that I made in looking at having reasonable line items across the district.
So they would
And
have.
sometimes there's reductions made in various areas, and that, what you're alluding to, is probably one of them.
Okay, thank you.
Here, I can ask you those questions. So the question regarding the instructional coordinator salary at Nipmuc, one of the things that was in that line item was the webmaster for the district is moved to a technology line.
How about the Bluff and Memorial?
They're up because instructional coordinators. I think they were down. Oh, yeah, I know why. Because by mistake, we had a stipend position in both buildings at full amount instead of being split between the two. What's the difference about that? Oh, because if we went to a dean of students and had somebody, or not a dean of students, I'm sorry, a team chair, we would hopefully eliminate the need for a head teacher, so that was the part of the reduction.
Thank you. Classroom instructional technology. Is this for projectors? Let's see, it went up 110% at Nipmuc and Misco as well.
Classroom instruction technology.
At Nitlock and Nisco, they went up 110%.
All right, so the increase there has to do with replacing leasing, because all the technology we have is expiring, so the Apple, the MacBooks that all the teachers have, the HP desktops that all the office has, there's money in there for some iPads, so that's the increase. That was something Joe highlighted.
Just out of curiosity, with instructional software, does that include the, I think it's a piloted iReady software program? I'm not sure. Could be at Nisco, Clough Memorial.
The iReady app is testing is included in the technology lines.
Other student activities. Salaried positions. Nitlock? Nisco, Clough Memorial, just looking for clarification of what a salaried other student activity position would be.
All right. I'll read out what that includes at Nitlock. It's similar to all of the buildings, if I can just get this to go up a little bit. Has to do with the facility use coordinator, AP coordinator, class advisors, DECA, music, drama. Let's see, peer educator advisors, peer tutoring homework, PSAT coordinators, scholarship coordinators, student council advisors, student disabilities services, threshold, work study coordinator. These are all the stipend positions that are in the teacher's contract for student activities.
Okay, so those are stipended positions?
Yes.
Okay.
All part of your contract.
Just with salary. And then, nearing the end, employee separation salary expense, which went up 100%.
So those are the costs of teachers that retire. We generally have to pay back buy back their sick leave, or those various costs that went up because we underfunded it this year.
And then also, just for clarification, under teacher classroom sped, those are the paras underneath department heads, non-supervisory.
Instructional coordinator.
Teachers classroom sped 2305. Any building.
Those are the salaries for your special education teachers in all the buildings.
And then paraprofessionals, wondering where ADA techs fall, if they're also under there? Yes, excellent, thank you. And that is all. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Hi, ma'am. Thanks for being patient.
Sure. Stephanie Freeman at Parent at Memorial. My question is really about assuming that we have this go through and we get all this wonderful funding, what happens next year?
That's a great
Where's the
question.
money in the town budget? Are we going to be sitting here again next year and the year after, et cetera?
That's a great question. I think, like most years, it's a balancing act. And we've had many, many years where the regional school district budget has been revenue-based. And we are in a situation very, very similar to where we were in 2015, where the year before we had to really hit hard things like E&D, or excess and deficiency, our free cash. We've had to hit hard school choice. Matter of fact, to make this year's budget work, we had to hit school choice to the tune of $1 million. So it's challenging, but I am confident we can make it work. Because there's also the reality of, again, the balance, where we're not going to go to our two communities and ask for an override each and every single year.
But if we don't ask for, if we only fund those 4 critical positions and level of service, then there's still money in the budget for all those other wonderful positions that I know I would like to see in our school.
So again, I think that is a conversation for parents like you to stay engaged. It's also a conversation for the regional school committee, and it's also a conversation with our town officials, our board of selectmen, and our finance committees about what is feasible, what is doable, what is financeable in our communities. But it is a great question.
Could I also add one to that? There's been some amazing work by volunteers. I know Diane Duncan was instrumental in coming up with Repair Misco. We've been able to put improvements into the Misco school, even though we were quite fiscally tied by not being able to make changes there. I think we need a 5-year plan out of both communities that sets clear goals as to what the school is going to be and how we're going to get there. And also, we love their participation from the town side as well in some of the negotiation of the contracts that we've got, and some of the influence with the state officials to show that our problems are real and they're not just coming from, for lack of a better word, a kind of spoiled town, that's complaining a lot. So I think there's a lot of things we can do. Activism is very important. It's very hard for us to get away from our jobs and participate in some of the community functions, but it's becoming critical now. We need help. We can't just go. We have a day on the Hill every year where we go and try to advocate for our school district. And the state's not doing some of the things that it pledged to do, and we're pretty angry about that, quite frankly. And we need more people to be playing than just us.
Well, I can speak for the Memorial PTO that if we know the messages we need to get out, we will do that. But if we don't know what the messages are, we can't necessarily educate people that maybe read our emails.
That's a very good comment.
I just put it that way. Thank you.
Good evening, parent from Memorial. First of all, I want to say thank you to our schools, just because I see what they do to my daughter. So in general, I would be supportive to the increase that you presented. However, and I think I've seen some of these parents on the Upton Parents Group, part of Upton Parents Group, you're expressing that, but in general, that is not sustainable. Like, keep going this way, and based on what you presented, we will keep going this way because of the rain is coming out of the staff portions of salaries, right? So, what is that? And I actually think I actually spent time looking at the budget at Hopkinton and Holliston, and if you were to recalculate it back into the per student, we're actually a few thousand above that. Like our budget is something like 17,000 per student. Hopkinton is in the neighborhood of 15.
No, our budget is, I can pull up the exact numbers in a minute, but it's in the high 15s per
We
student.
can do simple math. It's 39 million divided by 2,200. That would be.
Well, that's the
17.
proposed for next year.
Right.
I'm talking current,
That's
yeah.
what I'm talking about. And I looked at the proposed budget for Holliston and proposed budget for Hopkinton, and they are all a few thousand lower. So is there
No, that's not an apples to apples comparison, sir, because as a regional school district, we subsume the healthcare insurance numbers. Whereas in a school district that is part of a municipality like Holliston and Hopkinton, the town side picks up the healthcare insurance numbers.
Well, but at the end of the day, we pay for that as well.
Sure,
So-
absolutely.
So maybe the math is different, but at the end of the day, we are the ones who are paying for that. And like I said, I'm all for increase. I'd rather pay for my daughter's education now than figuring out what she's going to do later on in her life. But 10% each year isn't going to be sustainable every year. And that's what we're looking at right now. So if there is anything we can do as part of the later voting to actually come up with a way, with a plan, how we can sustain it or restructure it moving forward so that we don't have a 10% conversation every year, which is what we are going to see if we just keep doing that.
Well, if you were to look at the historical increases in non-override years, you're talking about regional school district budgets that are in the ballpark of 2.5% increases. So this is a dramatic increase. I'm in complete agreement with you. But I think it also is to a larger conversation about the very nature of Mendon and Upton. Now, I know Upton has been doing a lot of work to come up with a vision, a plan to revitalize or get something going as far as business and industry around Main Street, but realize these are two communities, you know, that Upton, 96% of its tax base is residential. Mendon, it's 94%. The other 6% is Kevin Meehan. And, you know, essentially, you're talking about two communities that are bedroom communities, strictly bedroom communities. Now, granted, Hopkinton is a little bit different. There isn't a lot of business and industry, but you do have EMC Dell there. And, I think it's part of, and again, I'm not speaking for the regional school committee. I do not live in either one of these communities, but I think, quite frankly, it's part of the trade-off for living in a bedroom community. I think ultimately it's a question for residents such as yourself, sir, to make the decision about what type of investment do you want to make in the school.
I could also add to that. I think your concerns are well-founded. We had this discussion about the 5-year projections in our February 24th meeting, and the minutes from that actually contained projections over the next 5 years, and none of them were 10%. They were about 3-4%. That's still over the 2.5 levy limit, right? So I think your concerns are well-founded. Just the numbers are a little bit lower than you were suggesting. We do have to come up with more money than the 2.5 levy limit can accommodate over the next few years, and I think that's where the real discussion needs to take place.
So why are we not speaking about maybe learning from other communities to improve the efficiency of our budget as opposed to finding additional findings for budget?
So I'm not going to speak to the details, but as part of the school committee, my impression and my understanding is that our costs are going up at a rate that is not sustainable by the 2.5 levy limit. Now, if you look at the specific line items, if you take, for example, transportation costs going up by 86% over the last 5 years, those types of increases are not, in some ways, we're not capable of getting a better deal on transportation costs because we're locked into the situation with one company on transportation. There's geography problems there, there's lack of competition, there's quite a few issues. But if you look at some of the details of the budget, what we're trying to do, and I hope what we're projecting is, we're trying to be very fiscally responsible with this budget. And we're trying to do that every single year, knowing that we have a limitation within the towns. Now, some of the things that we can do at the town level are coming up with more income at the town level, which allows us all to have leeway in how much tax money we spend and how much income we have available to all the town services.
Hi, Carolyn Hartman.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. I'm a parent and a staff member, and I have a question and a comment. The question is in regard to accreditation concerns you have with the librarian position. And can you tell us what impact that has on students applying for colleges, especially those applying for selective colleges? Is that going to be a real blemish on their?
So there's two adverse actions that NEAS could take based upon the lack of fulfillment. They could change the accreditation status right now based upon its visit in 2014, I believe it was, John, 2015. NEAS passed with flying colors, and actually in an exemplary fashion. But they could change the status to either warning or probation, okay? And warning is not public. It would be something that we would share with the school committee. However, probation is public. So when a school has a probationary status, it's actually published on the NEAS website. Do I think, to be very candid and very honest, do I think that students would still apply to colleges and they would still get into colleges? Yes. But is it one of those 5%er or, types things that college admissions offices would know about the status should we be probationary in nature? Yes, they would know. And it's obviously something that's deleterious.
So a follow-up to that is, what constitutes probationary versus warning? What would?
So that's great. So usually during a commission-directed visit, they would want to know what steps have first the school administration, the district administration done to rectify the problem. And then they would also want to know, in the case of this particular standard, it's the standard for community resources for learning. So they would also want to know what was the community's response to the problem and is this an issue of level of support and so on.
All right, so my comment is just that I've been a resident of this community for 17 years, and so I've gone through the 2 override processes. The first one in 2009, 2011 time span where it was defeated, and then again the next one 5 years later, which passed, which was still a difficult passing. And I just wanted to make a comment to the general public that my kids at that point were really young. Now they're in the end stage of school here. So there's been some of us who've gone through both and understood the impact of losing so many positions and having elementary schools, elementary class sizes of 34 kids, and losing art and music and different programs. And I'm not sure if a lot of the current parents of students experience that, and so I just want to put that out there that I think part of maybe the passing the second in 2015 was because people had experienced it recently, but now it's been 10 years since here having those impacts. So I just want everyone to encourage people to talk this up, everybody get some information about what's going on, because it can be really impactful for a long time to come.
Thank you. Actually, I think, no offense, I think Steve was at the mic first.
Good evening, Steve Battalion, Upton BOS. My question is about the presentation for us, the labor component of it. We know going forward that Worcester County regional retirement increases each year, healthcare costs increase each year. If the override passes and we do hire these additional positions, isn't this only going to trigger the same action 4 years down the road, 3 years down the road, by, again, keep increasing our full-time staff is going to trigger this same problem moving forward. And I guess my other question is, if right now we're at 440 or 445 full-time employees, is that by ratio, looking at our student population, is that a competitive ratio, say, to the Hopkintons, the Hollistons, the Milfords, and that sort of thing?
It is. If you go through the individual pages and you look at the individual school budgets, you can get all that statistical information as far as student-to-teacher ratios and average class sizes and so on. I would say this, we being the district leadership team and the regional school committee work very, very hard to find efficiencies everywhere and anywhere that we possibly can. And again, I would say during non-override years, what we usually have, on that funding sheet, it says revenue budget. And we are cognizant of what the revenue is in our two communities. To your first question, Steve, about what we request and the viability of what we request what we need. We request what our students need and the staffing to staff the programs and services that we need. I think you balance that with trying to find efficiencies wherever and whenever that you can, and we'll continue to do that. I can tell you in the interim, between 2015 to today, we found some remarkable efficiencies. Something that I'm super proud of is we've locked in our energy costs, at least our electricity costs, for 20 years for the simple reason that we've gone solar. And 100% of our energy is strictly solar based. And it's case in point every time you drive past the Middleton. So again, you do everything that you can to find efficiencies, but I think the bottom line is you put forward a proposal with the things that you need and what our kids need here and there.
Two cookies. The full-time team chairperson. At this point, I may be jumping ahead, but at this point, do we know what school that would be assigned?
It would be one of the two elementary schools, and right now we've got one that would be who's splitting her time between the two. We would ask her, what's your preference? What does it look like? Yeah.
And then my second question is more general. My daughter's a kindergartner. I'm very new to this process. What would you suggest parents do to support the program?
Well, I think become informed. I think we meet every single 2 weeks. We split it. The next meeting in 2 weeks is at MISCO, and then the next 2 weeks after it's back here at Nipmuc. So I think getting informed and knowing what the issues are is extremely important. Between now and our 2 town meetings and our 2 town elections in May, I'm going to tell you that various aspects of the budget are going to be front and center at each and every single school committee meeting. I would also recommend, if you don't already, follow me or follow the regional school district, both on Facebook or on Twitter, and we're constantly putting information out there.
Donna Schlangen, resident and staff. Just a quick question in regards to kind of piggybacking Carolyn's question. As far as the accreditation and the warning / probation, depending on what we get, what's the time frame, from this point forward? When could this happen? In how many years?
It could happen. It could happen as soon as this coming summer.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joshua Vernon. Actually grew up in the community, just moved back about a month ago.
Welcome back.
And I'm a parent of the MISCO system and want to thank that entire system for welcoming my daughter. It's been a great transition. You speak of some of the efficiencies that you're constantly looking at. I work in the clean technology space, so that's amazing about the solar. But in terms of efficiencies, I know there's a lot of grants that the school can apply for. I know one recently passed or ended on the 6th of March for the school water improvement grant. I'm new. I don't know if we applied for it or how that was handled, but something like you talk about the burner and that being needed to be replaced. If we're we're not passing this lead test that we could have gotten a grant to have taken care of, that's a future expense. Can you speak to some of that?
Sure. So over the last couple of school committee meetings, we've gone into great detail. Two people that I've recognized time and again, our Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Maureen Cohen, and our Director of Technology Integration, Dave Quinn, have done exemplary work in literally, I want to say in the last 18 months, bringing in approximately at least $250,000 in grant funding. And things like we have a makerspace known as the Inspired Innovation Center at MISCO. Just in grant funding alone, we've brought in, what, about $175,000 in the last year, 15 months. We've brought in, both Maureen and Dave have brought in Project Lead the Way, which is a national kind of STEM curriculum outfit to work to build the curriculum in the Inspired Innovation Center. And also realize, again, in kind of speaking to bricks and mortar, we once again will be in the queue through the Massachusetts School Business Authority for some of our facility upgrades. Specifically, one of our big concerns, again, original 1997 building, is to replace the roof here on Nipmuc and also for that boiler repair. So the grant writing will be done in conjunction by myself and also Jay Beyer, our Director of Finance and Operations. So we're constantly looking for those opportunities.
Just a quick follow-up. So the SWIG, was that applied for? Because that's a huge cost. You don't qualify. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tommy Cross, I'm a parent of a student at Memorial, also an employee of Holliston, having worked in Hopkinton as well, so, and Medway. So I had a question about the school psychologist. You talked a lot about them working in a capacity of counseling. How much will they be doing in terms of testing, assessments for special education?
It's also a major responsibility as well. And in fact, a good chunk of that, I think I talked about that line item as a purchase service. The overwhelming majority, if not all of that purchase service expenditures goes towards assessment.
I'm actually thrilled to see that on the line item. When I found out we did not have school psychologists, I was embarrassed. I worked for a district that did not have one, and it doesn't make any sense, so I'm in full support of that. My other question is around NEASC. So in Medway a number of years ago, we were in the NEASC process and we were debating whether it made sense to pay for this process and what the benefits were. And there are some districts in New England that can't afford to pay.
Very few.
Very few, yes. And there are very few colleges, if any, that I'm aware of that would not take a student because of our lack of accreditation. Particularly if we stated why we weren't interested. Has there ever been any creative thinking around getting that reflective feedback that NEASC is great at giving, but not paying the price tag that's associated? Maybe partnering with like Framingham State, or sort of a rhetorical question, but something to think about.
Sure.
Because that reflection could come from different sources.
I would not advocate for that for the simple reason that I think statistically, and John, you could probably back up, John and I have both in our past done a lot of extensive work with NEASC. Both of us have served on the Commission for Public Secondary Schools. Both of us have chaired many visits. But I believe it's upwards of 96, 97% of high schools in the 6-state region are accredited through NEASC, the majority of which who are not tend to be in northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire, and so on. I view NEASC as this, that it is a third-party accountability measure. It's a third-party, external party that is validating the quality of a high school, and quite frankly, the high school is the anchor of your district. And we can have a healthy intellectual debate, but it really is the gold standard for accreditation agencies, and it is well known by colleges and universities, particularly in New England. And the overwhelming majority of our kids go to schools in New England. I know very, very well of the communities that, I think it was now 5 or 6 years ago, toyed with the idea, and actually in cases like Burlington, Lexington, withheld their annual dues to NEAS, but realized they all did a 180. So again, Burlington High School, Lexington High School, Brookline, they're all still accredited with NEAS. And I understand what their philosophical disconnects were, but realize their philosophical disconnects really weren't around community support. They were around some of the pieces with regard to curriculum and teaching and learning that NEAS was really pushing that in their practice. Thank you.
One last question, sorry, I'm gonna be that person. So by keeping services and level through this override, do we potentially put at risk the competitive nature or the competitiveness of our students as they move towards an uncertain future? So today I was talking to the principal of Holliston. We were watching a video by Ted Dintersmith, which is all about what schools could be. I'm sure you're familiar with it, yes. And a very scary video about what the future holds in terms of the level of automation that's out there. And I saw a position cut at the middle school for an engineering teacher, and I hear you saying Project Lead the Way, which is all very exciting to me, given the future that we have, but I'm worried that we're cutting those positions that make us competitive.
Great question. Great question.
It can be rhetorical. I'm just putting it out there for people to think about.
And again, and I really appreciate that, but I think it kind of speaks to moving forward and, you know, the commitment, and it's great to have that passion and that interest in what we really need, but then it also comes down to the balancing act of revenue, the balancing act of what our communities will have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? All right, I invite everybody to, sorry?
Can I have one more
Oh,
question?
yeah, absolutely.
I think it would be good if each member of the school committee could actually take a minute and just kind of make sure that their thoughts are well recorded in terms of this budget and kind of direction and where we're going. I think it'd be beneficial for everybody to understand kind of where we stand, because I think that's an important thing for the people in the community out there. So they understand that it's not just Joe talking about this, or Dr. Marichek talking about it, but actually where each individual stands. Is that okay? Did I ask that question?
From the left to right.
So yes, I am in favor of this budget. This is not my ideal budget. It doesn't contain many of the priorities that I favor and have favored in the 9 years that I've served on this committee, or almost 9 years. However, I think it reflects the pragmatism, the dedication to our students, and balancing act that we do between what the towns can responsibly contribute and what we have to do in the best interest of our students here in the district. So yes, I do support this budget.
Yes, I'm also very much in favor of the budget, and I know I've made this comment before, but we had an independent evaluation come in, to look at our special education services, and we were told that we are very lightly staffed in psychology and behavioral health. So to me, like, those two school psychologist position and the team chair position are absolutely critical. There's other positions that were on the list that didn't make it that I would love to see implemented, but we're trying to be responsible. But in my view, those are critical needs and we need
I'm also fully in support of the budget that we're proposing tonight. I think it's our best effort to balance critical needs for the district and resources within our communities. I actually ran for the school committee because I really wanted to emphasize the need in our district for social and emotional learning practices. So the fact that we are proposing a minimum of 2 school psychologists is a baby step in the direction that I think our district needs to take. As Vicki mentioned, this is a critical need that's been identified by outside sources coming into our district. And I'd certainly love to advocate for larger steps in that direction. But again, there's been a lot of thought and effort put into balancing the needs of the district and the resources of our community. So again, I'm fully in support of this budget.
I'm also very much in support of the budget. I think that it's a minimum of, I think we've made a very strategic decision on the things that we've asked for in the budget. I also wish we could afford to add more things into the budget, but I think what we've come to you with as far as what we've asked for in this budget are things that are the bare minimum needs, and I'm very much in favor of it, and I think that as a community, we have to support our schools. The schools are what make the base of the community strong, and that is what draws people and holds people together. A strong community is the strength within the schools, and it's a difficult fight, but it's necessary, and our kids are our future. We have to make a decision based on what our kids need, and this is what they need.
You want to talk?
No, go right ahead. I don't want to take it away from you.
No, I'm very, very strongly in support of this budget. The thing that we, when we get into these meetings, these presentations, we very rarely talk about all the accomplishments of the school because there's so many of them and they're across so many different areas. Just the ways that we do extra funding, the grants and everything that the team has come up with, the creativity the administrators show in trying to come up with different ways to evaluate students, move into the future on how we progress in education. It's really amazing stuff that they're doing here. If we go at level budget, these guys are creative. They make things work. Now, I'm not saying that we're intentionally trying to restrict the budget from them. That's not the point. But we're able to, because they're so talented and because we've got a very good teaching staff and great kids, I mean, this school in particular is like a college. This is not like a typical classroom school. These kids have the freedom to explore, to educate themselves, to look for different initiatives that have been undiscovered in the past, and to really talk to and negotiate with their teachers about how they're going to develop. I think this whole district is a gem, and the fact that we can't support it much more strongly is a shame, but I also realize there's fiscal responsibility that we need to take. And these guys are worth every penny that we can put in their pocket.
Thanks. So I've been quiet through most of this. I think many people, a number of people know me, know my opinion, and know I do support this budget. I just wanted to make sure to say a couple of things because I think it's important. One, as we've talked about, it is an inflection point of the town. And the towns have the same challenges we have as well. The state isn't going to bail us out. They feel our affluence level, they feel we as towns should be able to afford more. They're going to push us to those levels of Westboro or Hopkinton or Southborough. That's where they're going. So whether we solve it today or we continue to deal with it in the years to come, it's all going to be there and it's going to require us. And it's not just a perspective of, you know, what it is that the school is, but it's what it is that the town services are. Because I will tell you, in my experience in this, there aren't many areas that you as an individual can have an impact on what it is you get back from the taxes you pay. And so this is one of the key areas where that does happen, okay? And I think that's a big deal. So when the woman, I apologize, I forgot your name, but when you came up and asked, what can you do to help? Quite simply, you can tell your friends, you can post about it in the different areas on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or Snapface, whatever you call it. Go back to that one. But you know, your perspectives and opinions are important and they're valuable to us, especially as we work through this process up to the votes, up to the town meetings. Because while we can approve a number here, because I think this is an important point, we can approve a number at a certain level, and we can go down as we work it through, but we can't go up. I don't think many people understand this because they talk about run it like a business, do all these things. I said the same thing when I first joined the committee, for probably 3 to 4 years before I joined the committee. And when you dig into the details around the budgets and the numbers and the way they're collected, I'm happy to spend some time with you and go through it, because I think when you look at the numbers, you'll actually see we are a very efficient district. Okay, you'll see those numbers in the way they work. But the point I guess I'm making there is that your opinions and perspectives are important to us. Okay, we listed them, we're looking at them from the standpoint of where we're going as a town, as a community. All right, so, and this is an area where you can have a very direct impact. So get your friends out, let their opinions be known, your opinions and perspectives be known. It's very important to us all. Okay? And vote. Yes, I will say that. Vote. I would agree with that. So, and that's all I'll say.
Sorry, I should have asked already on. Do you mind?
No.
Sorry. I'm Lisa Allen. I've got kids at Misco, Kill, and Nipmuc. And I'm also the donations chair for We Care Misco, so if anyone wants to give anything, give me. My first question is, this will be my first override, obviously not from the US, so I'm kind of struggling to understand everything about it. What will the override mean in terms of percentage on residential taxes? If you pass the override, what does it equate to?
So there are a lot of different factors that play into this, and I will steal from my good friends on the Finance Committee and the Selectmen. We as a school committee don't determine an override, but we're smart enough to know that our budget ask could create, which this one will. In terms of what exactly will be the exact percentage increase, those numbers will only come out as we get closer to the vote and the towns actually work through their overall budgets, and I call it the puts and takes of the different departments and the things that are there. Because there are other components.
What did it kind of work out to give a rough estimate?
So I've done a spreadsheet that I've gotten property valuation for all the towns' property values. It's a combination of all that. I would tell you, don't quote me that you said this, but I would say on average, depending on the value of your house, you're probably talking anywhere from around $300 to $500 a year.
Okay, so it's not. It's only like it's less than, it's like 1% or.
I would say if your house is worth $1.8 million, it'd probably be more than $500.
Yeah. Awesome. And another question for you. What happens if one town passes it and one town doesn't?
That's a great question. I love that question. So it's very easy for us if both towns agree and they don't pass it, or both towns agree and do pass it. That's very easy. Sort of like, if one town passes it and one town doesn't, then the school committee has a choice to be made about the tools we have. We can work with the different committees and understand in both towns of where, do we make adjustments? Do we go back for a smaller override? What might we do? The last option, which is truly one because we are a community in the way we run our school system, and it's just a tool we have, is what's called a joint town meeting, where we bring both towns together to vote as one group around this, which would then in turn require each town to then adhere to whatever decision was made. Okay?
I just want to mention that there are plenty of people. I'm from Mendon. There are plenty of people on fixed budgets and fixed income that do suffer in these times when taxes are increasing, and especially if we're talking about a 5-year plan where taxes increase all the time. So I just want to be very respectful of those people, and the reason why we are being fiscally responsible is because we are causing pain with this. We're very cognizant of that. I just think that there's, similar to some of the things they've done in Hopkinton lately, where they've been trying to figure out as a town how to mitigate some of those pains. I know Mendon's trying to do something about that, and I don't know exactly what Upton is doing, but I just want to be respectful of that.
I can tell you what Upton and Mendon also will have in regards to that. There is the tax abatement process, which allows those people that have income requirements and things like that to also be able to manage their tax strictly through that.
One question, slightly related. Just on the ALICE buckets with schools. I know everyone's had ALICE training and all the kids have gone through it, but the resource officer in LISCO still doesn't have the ALICE buckets to actually pass out to the classes, so they don't actually have that facility even though they've all had the training. Now I know he put up a sign-up sheet for people to donate the buckets and all of the bits and pieces that need to go into them. I know I donated one. But I was speaking to him recently and he said that he was told to take down the sign-up sheet because people were complaining about it, saying that it was supposed to be part of the school budget and that it had to be considered in the new school budget and that he couldn't ask for help and donations on it.
And there is a consideration for that as well.
There is, okay,
Yes.
so you will be getting this.
Because again, in the relative scheme of things, in a $39 million budget proposal, you're talking about things like what he refers to as go buckets. That's something that is imperative that we do provide that.
So we're getting it. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, with no further questions, we'll move on with the agenda. All right, so we're done with public comment. Now we move on to the certification process. So can I get a motion on the 5 different articles? Yes, I am ready. Go.
So I make a motion to set the operational budget for the Mendon Upton Regional School District for the 2020-2021 fiscal year at $38,961,161. It consists of general operations within the levy limit of $38,139,023 and debt service outside the levy limit of $822,138.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Yeah, you don't need a roll call.
Okay, so any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next.
Second motion. I make a motion to assess the town of Mendon $11,374,098 that consists of the following. 1, minimum local contribution, $7,725,850. Non-discretionary charges, $885,952. Discretionary charges, $2,359,033. Long-term debt, Clough Memorial School, $334,878. And long-term debt, Misco Green Repair, $68,385.
Second.
All those, any discussion first? Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. All those opposed? None? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next motion.
I make a motion to assess the town of Upton $13,611,689 that consists of the following. Minimum local contribution, $9,124,333. Non-discretionary charges, $1,110,785. Discretionary charges, $2,957,696. Long-term debt, Clough Memorial School, $334,872. Long-term debt, Misco Green Repair, $84,003.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, moving on to motion number 4.
I make a motion to appropriate $13,725,374 from state aid that consists of the following. Chapter 70 funds, $12,514,066. Regional transportation reimbursement, $1,165,563. Charter school tuition reimbursement, $45,745.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to motion number 5.
I make a motion to appropriate $250,000 from the following school district sources. Vision sped tuition, $75,000. Transfer in from revolving accounts, $150,000. And Medicaid reimbursement, $25,000.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion number 5 passes. All 5 motions pass. The Upton Mendon, or Mendon-Upton Regional School District certified budget is certified. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, correspondence. Do we have any correspondence?
There is none.
No correspondence. Any other topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance? I don't believe there are any. So, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much for attending, everyone.
Thank you.